And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, August 4th, 2021. Good to be back here with you in a Wednesday session. And I'm excited to jump right in to introduce our featured artist and take a look at his work. And our artist today comes from Austin, Texas, Frank Trocino. Frank, if I can pull you in, and it should be asking you to unmute now. Good morning and welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Frank, begin by giving us a little bit of your background, how you got into art, a little bit about your career, and we'll take off from there.
All right. Well, from the very beginning, I was born in New York. My family moved to Oregon when I was about 6 or 7 years old. So when people usually ask me, I tell them I'm from Oregon. But when art people ask me, I say New York because it sounds a little bit better. But I was interested in architecture from a very early age. Went to architecture school at University of Oregon and the Academy of Rome in Rome, Italy. And graduated, moved to the Los Angeles area, started my own architectural firm. We designed theme parks for like Disney, Universal, people like that. So I've always been painting and drawing my entire life as an architect. And then some events happened after 30 or 40 years, and I decided to quit the architectural business. I actually got a job in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia as an architect, where I worked for 8 years for a large firm, continually doing my artwork and my painting at night and in the background. And then when I moved back into the States, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and started as an artist full time, and then eventually moved to Austin, and basically I'm here now.
Yeah, so let's. I mean, it's right away. Hearing your background in architecture, that's going to have, I think, a big part in what we see in your work. Let's jump into the work, and you can talk to us a little bit about the development of your style and kind of what's interesting you in terms of subject matter. Let me pull us. Oh, hold on here. There we go. Here we go. Share. There it is. So talk to us just a little bit about kind of your approach to subject matter and kind of what's drawn you forward stylistically and how the work has developed over time.
Sure. My subject matter is mostly couples and relationships, and then, of course, some architectural abstracts. But as you can see in my couples paintings, there's usually an architectural element in the background. And I think I like couples and relationships because designing theme parks, you always had to have a backstory for a ride or an event. And I like that whole concept of a couple or relationship. And I actually make up backstories for all of my paintings of couples, and they're totally fictitious. And it's about how the couple got into the scene that I painted them and what their story is. And those are all posted on my website if any of you have seen them. And then I branched into more abstract architectural because, like the saying goes, you can take the kid out of architecture, but you can't take the architecture out of the kid. So I was immediately drawn to some architectural abstracts. And my style is a little bit different. As you can see, there's a lot of cubism, a little bit of pop art in them as well, a la Lichtenstein from my couple's work. I started out drawing digitally using Procreate on my iPad. And I draw or paint the whole thing digitally. And then my process is, then I dumb it down. I usually dilute the saturation, and then I get it printed on very, very heavy archival paper. And then I overpaint the entire painting with acrylic or ink um, watercolor, watercolor pencil, Copic markers, a little bit of combination of everything. And then I varnish it, wax it, and mount it on a board.
And so, how much of that process comes directly from your background in architecture? How much work were you doing digitally in your architectural career versus drafting? Kind of talk about process a bit.
Yeah, I think the process is very, I mean, I hate to say this because it sounds very unartistic, but it's very mechanical and very crisp and deliberate. And that definitely comes from my architectural background. I mean, my whole last, 30 years of as an architect, everything was digital. There was not a drafting board in our office. And I think that's kind of how I evolved to this process that I use today. The digital part though is less than half. I finish digitally, I figure I'm about only 35–40% done with the painting. The rest of it is very time consuming, hand drawn, and it kind of gives it a more painterly feel.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm looking forward to getting some comments on the work. But as I kind of read a little bit about your process, I was surprised to see that how much digital work is involved there. It feels very organic. I mean, even though it's structured, it feels organic and as you say, painterly. And so kind of learning about that process adds a lot of interest to what you are doing. Let's just we've got a couple more images to look at, and then let's also talk a little bit in terms of your medium and your substrates. It looks like you are working on panel and paper. How has that developed over time? How did you come up with your approach to the presentation of the work?
Yeah, basically, originally I was not laminating the paper onto the wood panels. It was just plain paper. I found that this aesthetic look of mine actually looked better when it was laminated on the boards and actually had a crisper, more refined look. And also, I went that route also because I wanted to kind of establish a sense of permanence. And believe it or not, I actually think the panels are easily to store than plain paper. They're more robust. They can take a little bit more of manhandling if they're not quite handled correctly. I actually really, really enjoy the process, and I'm glad that I went to the lamination part.
And did kind of working through that and figuring out how to laminate and format, was that quite a process to come up with what you've eventually achieved? And again, I can't help but think that as an architect, you've spent a lot of time thinking about construction and processes and the mechanics of putting things together. Or was it fairly easy to come up with this process?
It was kind of right in between. I did ruin a few paintings. The good thing about my process is when I ruined a finished piece, it isn't lost forever. I can go back, get another print, and restart the whole hand drawing thing again. But yeah, it took a while to find the right adhesive, the right panel. For example, I kept getting all sorts of air bubbles and creases no matter how much I rolled it. And I found out basically on my own, the reason is if I primed the raw wood panel first with a airbrush medium, all the glue doesn't absorb into the soft wood, and it got rid of all the creases and the air bubbles. And that was just happenstance. It's just going over
trial and error
and figuring it out. I wish someone had done it before me, and I would have saved a lot of time.
Yeah, and so do you buy the panels pre-built?
I buy the panels pre-built from Cheap Joe's in North Carolina. They're very, very nice panels. He does a very good job, and they're not that expensive. I was surprised. most of the big 24 by 30 panels, I can get them on sale for $25 to $30, which isn't bad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, let's invite the panel in and talk a little bit about the work itself, what your reaction to the work was as you first discovered it, and maybe had the opportunity to explore Frank's website. Feedback in terms of what you're seeing and in terms of the consistency of the work. Who would like to jump in with the first comments in the panel? Just throw your hand up in front of the screen, or let me go to Beverly first. Good afternoon, Beverly. You're in Europe, so we're glad to have you here. I'd love to hear your reaction on the work.
Hi. Yeah, I really like the work. It probably isn't for me. I probably wouldn't hang it in my own house, but that I still think it's very accomplished, and I think that it definitely will find a market. And I really like the couples pictures. I think they have more life in them than the architecture. And I think you were asking about where to find an audience for it, but I think it's going to be a bit like your process. It'll be a bit of trial and error. I think it will appeal to young people, but not only, because there's a sort of like a moviegoers type theme as well. It could be anyone that likes going to see romantic movies, or as you were saying, theme park goers. It's people that, yeah, lots of people like portraits, and they're modern, funky, and fun.
Excellent. Anyone want to hop in with agree, disagree with Beverly about the work, the consistency of what we're seeing? Other comments? And if you don't volunteer, I will volunteer you. Let me go, Bill, let me pull you in. It should be asking you to unmute. There we go. You click on the microphone. Gotcha, Bill. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. I like the work a lot. I think it's interesting. I like the process that you're using with the work. I guess my part of my question has to do with why you're doing layered on the wood rather than either painting the edges or playing with even bringing the paint around onto the wood and making it a real solid three-dimensional painting. That's one of the questions I have. Then I'll talk again later.
Yeah, Frank, how did you come up with the process and decide kind of about the final presentation of the work and how you'd handle the sides of the canvases?
Yeah, actually, that was an excellent comment, because that edge treatment is giving me a lot of heartburn. And I am experienced. I did do one all black on the edges. Didn't really like it. I think it looked nice, but so I am experienced with taking the image down the edges. And that way the piece would not have to be framed at all. Right now, they can be framed much like a stretch canvas. And I'm kind of thinking that most people will frame them, but I do like that option of working the edges and that more of a modern, contemporary presentation.
Yeah, that is an interesting question, and if you kind of think about format and presentation and display of the work and how people are going to encounter it, as an artist today, working today, you kind of have a little bit more of a decision-making process to go through than an artist might have 20 or 30 years ago, when most of the work was going to be framed. More and more, not only are artists moving to, a box stretched canvas or panels, as you mentioned, either painting the sides or continuing the image around the sides. Not only are the artists doing more of that, but collectors are more interested in a more contemporary, simpler format. They may not want certainly many don't want a, very ornate, fussy frame. But even some are preferring not to have any frame at all. They want the work to feel more integral to the space that it's going into and more self-contained. And so we're seeing more and more of our clients not framing work and staying and deliberately staying away from frames, not just taking artwork as it comes to them, but looking for opportunities to have it. And for contemporary artists, artwork that has a more contemporary or abstracted style, I'm encouraging artists to think about formatting without frames. Not only can it be attractive, but it can simplify your production process and certainly can reduce your overhead and expenses of producing the work. Framing can be one of the most expensive elements in presentation. But when you do that, then you do have that decision-making process. Am I going to extend the artwork around the side or do painted edges? And I'll tell you, I am showing and selling artwork, unframed artwork in both of those formats. I have some of my artists who are just taking the painting around the side, and then I have others who are just doing a solid either color or a consistent color or a black on the sides. And our clients are very very accepting and not only accepting, but excited about that kind of format. So again, that's probably some trial and error, Frank, but I would suspect that while you could extend the image around the side, I wouldn't see that as a prerequisite for selling the work unframed. I would think that a black edge or a colored edge, if you're pulling one of the colors from the artwork itself and doing it in a solid, that could work as well. Some trial and error could kind of help you figure out what gets the best response. I wonder, anyone else want to hop in with a comment on presentation or what you have found in terms of framing versus not framing, how you're treating the edges, suggestions you might make for Frank? Again, if you want to just throw a hand up, I think I can see almost everybody in the video, or you can just click on mute and hop right in. No?
Can you hear me? This is Denise.
Yep, Denise, I've got you.
Hi, sorry, I don't have my video on because I'm barely up, but
that's okay.
I have used that technique of putting paper on the wood panel as well. And I found that painting the edge kind of stops the painting. It kind of draws the eye to the edge. So I kind of like his idea of just leaving the wood. It looks very contemporary, kind of Scandinavian. I think it matches the work.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Let's hop back and look. We're seeing here just the raw wood, and your process is clean enough that I would agree with Denise that might be another possibility of just leaving it raw, or maybe a varnish or something to have it pop a little bit more. But that raw natural wood could be a potential presentation as well. Excellent point. Anyone else on a comment and presentation? Bill, did you have another comment or question you wanted to throw toward Frank?
Actually, we're talking about the edge here. This shows the bonding, the layer of the wood, but doesn't Cheap Joe's also have it so you basically have just the facade so that it would be like a piece of wood, so it would be just one flat rather than the layers? And I wonder if that would make a difference. And the other thing, I liked what you said, Jason, that to pick a color that's from the painting and pull that to the edge. To play with that too could be something that would be interesting, not just black, but there could be a type of thing, the color comes out. But I also like the plain wood, but I just wonder if it was just the plain wood rather than the layers.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Frank?
Well, I think I'm going to do some experimenting with all of it. There is a panel that is a higher end panel. It's about twice as much, but that really isn't a factor that Cheap Joe's offers. I think they call it their museum quality wood panel, and the edges are much nicer. I believe they're straight fine grained fir, and they do look nicer. So I think if I choose to keep it raw, I'd probably go with that upgraded panel. If I choose to paint them either black or a accent color, I could probably get away with the lesser price panel. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna definitely be doing some experimentation with that.
Yeah, definitely worth exploring. And ultimately, and I beat on this drum quite a bit in these sessions, ultimately with decisions like this, I'm going to be working towards finding the right format and moving towards creating a consistent approach to the format. Sometimes it can become almost paralyzing as you experiment with different possibilities, where you're saying, okay, I've got these 3 or 4 different potential presentation opportunities here. I like them all. Which one is going to be the one that gets more attention? Which one's going to be more liked by my potential collector base? And ultimately, and again, I say this almost every week, but ultimately, it comes down to, I would encourage us not to worry too much about what is the right choice, because I'm convinced that the quote unquote right choice in almost any aspect of what you're doing is completely subjective. That it really comes down to just making a decision and then being consistent in that decision and pushing forward with it. And as you do that, you then find the audience, and the audience trusts you. They look at your artwork, they're interested in your style and your subject matter, and whatever you've chosen in terms of presentation, it's pretty rare that we find clients arguing with that. Why did the artist paint the side black? And now I'm going to have to do something. Really, that often just is not going to, most of the time, is not going to be an issue. They're just going to kind of follow your lead. Now, Frank, let's talk and let's jump back over. Let me get back over here. Let's talk a little bit about pricing. I think start by talking about how you are approaching valuing the work and putting a price point on it. And also talk a little bit about what exposure you've had and opportunities for sales, and how your buyers have responded to the work.
Sure. Pricing wise, I'm very, very consistent in my pricing. I arrived at $14.95, which is just under $1,500 for my larger 24 by 30s. I derived at that 2-step process. Actually, what I learned from your video, which I purchased and have watched like 3 times. I both did a square inch pricing exercise, and then I did a materials and time pricing exercise, and I kind of melded the 2 together and came up with the $14.95. And then as the pieces get smaller, the price goes down. I then divided that into an actual square inch, and I've stayed fairly consistent with pricing all my things square inch wise on the size. As far as the reaction I've gotten to pricing, I haven't sold a whole lot. I'm just kind of starting out. I've sold probably 12 pieces. I will quickly erase 6 of them because those were commissions. The other 6 were the other 4 were friends. 4 of the remaining 6 were friends and family, so I don't trust those.
Come on now, your friends and family have taste as well.
They do. 2 I've sold off my website at full price. Nobody tried to negotiate with me. I've been in a few group shows here in Austin, had my prices up, and I didn't hear any adverse comments about the price from either the people at the show or from the gallery who hosted the show. So right now I'm fairly confident in the pricing that I have.
Yeah, let anyone want to give feedback on the price points that you saw? Patricia, let me go to you. Should be asking to unmute. There we go.
Yes,
Gotcha.
I'm unmuted. I see his work as fitting into commercial places like banks, business offices, maybe doctor's offices, unless the ones that I really like are the couples relationships. And I can see those in contemporary modern homes but I see the more abstract ones as being places of business that they would appeal to. And maybe he hasn't marketed those for, for selling. Maybe he hasn't marketed the business places, but that's where I see them.
It's an interesting point in question. And it's always interesting to me because I would agree that there is definitely a potential market there, on the commercial side, institutional side. Those buyers we have found over the years are often looking for works that have architectural elements that are somewhat neutral. They're not making some kind of political statement or too dramatic in terms of composition. And so I could see that. It is also always interesting to me, though. I've worked with a number of artists over the years who just like you're talking about, Patricia, I would have expected their work to have a strong appeal in more commercial settings. Worked with sculptors who I felt that way, painters. And almost inevitably, most of the work we end up selling for those artists ends up going into private residences. It's just often surprising that, our aesthetic expectations for work just don't pan out. That when people like what they're seeing, they want to have it around them, and it can go into either their home or their commercial space. I would anticipate, though, Frank, that with your background in architecture, you probably have, if not direct relationships, at least a really good understanding of the more commercial market and maybe art consultants and designers and those kind of things. And it's not a bad idea to pursue either those relationships or your knowledge of that market. Is that something you have done or considered doing?
No, I definitely have considered doing it. To tell you the truth, my marketing effort has been very, very minimal. I've actually taken all the time I've spent as a full-time artist just developing my process and my art, and I'm just starting to do the marketing aspects of it. And probably like most of the artists who are watching in and most of the artists who will see this, it's not my favorite part of being an artist. And I'm sure everyone mostly agrees with that. But if I could I tell two real quick little short
Of course.
stories about my attempt at galleries?
Sure.
Okay, the first one was in Portland, Oregon, before I moved to Austin. And I admittedly, I think I was too early to show a gallery, but the reaction was very interesting. I took my iPad in there, just unannounced. The woman at least was gracious enough to look at my work as I walk in. And she scrolled through my stuff and she looked at me, and her only comment was, "I really wouldn't call yourself an artist. You're more of an illustrator." And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. But what made it a little bit better is that evening I went to dinner with a friend of mine who's a banker in Portland and literally knows everybody. And I was telling him the story and he goes, wait, was that so-and-so at such and such gallery? I go, yeah. He goes, oh, don't worry about her. She would insult Picasso if he came in. So I felt a little bit better. And then my second attempt was, and only attempt, was here in Austin. And I went into a gallery, which I was invited. And the woman looked at my work and she said she liked it. But my takeaway, and paraphrasing from her comments, was, in today's political climate, I'm not some kind of a marginalized victim, and my artwork is not really relevant at this time. And again, I was completely crushed. And so the whole gallery thing makes me very, very nervous.
Yeah, let me respond to that in two ways. One, you've already taken my video workshop, and you know that I'm a big advocate when you're getting ready to approach galleries, to approach a bunch of galleries. And
Right.
What you very quickly come to realize is that as you are getting out there and starting to show your portfolio, you're going to get a range of different responses from galleries, and that response is going to be you know, informed by the gallery owner's personal tastes, their philosophy and approach to the business. And I am always cautioning artists never to take a rejection or a negative comment too seriously or too personally, because you're just getting one person's opinion of your artwork. And just even having looked at the limited samples of work that we have here, and those of us who've hopped over on your website, I can tell you right now that there's definitely going to be an audience out there, of interested collectors and of galleries that will feel excited about showing your work and sharing your work with their collectors. And you've got to be very careful not to put too much stock or weight into one response or one feedback from a gallery. It's unfortunate that the very first two you talked to had to be very opinionated and have very specific maybe agendas with the work. But my suspicion is that as you continue to put your portfolio out to galleries, you'll start to get a much wider variety of comments from maybe some more direct feedback like that, again, expressing personal opinion, but also from galleries that will like the work, but maybe the timing isn't right. And then ultimately galleries who love what you're doing and would love to show it and agree to represent your work. And I think you've got some real strength going in terms of, again, the consistency of the work. Even though we see some variety in subject matter between the couples and the more architectural pieces, the underlying techniques and your aesthetic in the work is very consistent. And we do in some of the email comments, and we've already heard it among some of our panel, I hear a lot of comments about, I really love the couples, the portraiture work, the couples. I've seen that echoed a couple of times. But I would, again, just caution us to be a little bit careful. And Frank, especially in your case, if you enjoy doing both the couple pieces and the more architectural pieces, I would encourage you to build out a portfolio that shows samples of both of those works. I would suspect that you'll find some collectors and galleries that are just as, if not more, interested in the purely architectural pieces. It's good to have, within the consistency of your work, to have a little bit of variety there. But it seems to me that the big outstanding question to be answered as you're getting ready to do that is presentation. I would encourage you to kind of do that experimentation and figure out which presentation is the one you feel most strongly enhances the work that you're creating. Create work using that presentation consistently, and then present that work to galleries in a portfolio. And again, I would suspect it would not take long before you would find venues very interested and excited in showing your work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Other questions, comments, anything you'd like to discuss a little bit further about Frank's work and about getting out there? I see a hand, and forgive me if I mispronounce, but is it Yildiz? Yildiz, do I have you? Could be asking you to unmute now.
Yes,
You've
it's
had your hand up for a
Yıldız.
few moments. Gotcha.
It's Yıldız.
Yildiz.
Yeah, you were very close. And I'm sorry, I don't have an image. I have a very swollen face from an oral surgery I had a couple of days ago. Sorry about that.
No problem.
My
And
question.
speedy recovery.
Thank you. My question was both to Frank and to you, Jason, and maybe to everyone. I was wondering about your pricing, Frank. What was the reason, for instance, for the $14.95 instead of $1,500? It's better than $14.99, but still, why $14.95 and not $1,500? Is that really a wise decision for a piece of art? I wonder if it really almost, I hate to say cheapens, makes it like, I don't know, this box of chocolate or something. It's art. Why that $5 makes a difference?
Oh, I love this question. Frank, you respond first, and then I'll give some feedback.
I mean, a bomb just went off in my head, and
Oh.
you are so right. I kind of fell prey to the cheap retail marketing trap of putting something right under a major point, but you're absolutely right. This is artwork. This isn't a box of cereal. And I never thought of that before. But
It's an interesting point. I see some comments agreeing with both of you. I'm going to disagree with you. And it's going to sound crazy. And it does seem very commercial and very retail. But we have found what you described, Frank, actually does make a difference. That when I'm under, and this is mostly true when I'm at price points below $2,000. Above 2,000, it doesn't make quite as much of a difference. Although I would prefer to have a $2,400 piece of art to sell than a $2,500 or a $2,900 instead of a $3,000. It seems so crazy that it would make a bit of a difference. But often when I have a collector in the gallery looking at artwork, the psychology of pricing does become an important factor. I encourage artists to have a little bit of range of sizes, so some larger and smaller pieces, so that there can be a little bit of a sense of different price points. It seems stupid that $5 would make a difference, but I promise you it does. And it may be the most ridiculous, most retail, most commercial thing in the world, but at the end of the day, I would rather be commercial and retail and, and have a ridiculous $14.95 price point on it and sell 1.5 or 2 times as much artwork than I would for at $1,500 because of that psychology. And I can tell you, when it comes to the negotiation process, which also often comes into play, I find that if I can start with a little bit of a complicated number, again, $14.95 instead of $1,500, and then I can add some tax into it and maybe throw some shipping on top of it and have a little bit of an ugly, complicated number, 15, 24, and 30 cents, something like that, and then make an offer to the client. It'd be my pleasure to offer this piece to you at $14.50, and I'll take care of the shipping. It makes a huge difference. And we can argue about whether it should make a difference or whether it's very commercial. But at the end of the day, I am pragmatic about it. And what I have found is that it does make a difference. $7.95 instead of $800. $4.95 instead of $500. And you can experiment with this. If you're participating in shows or gallery spaces, try some pricing at the round numbers or the below the break points. Frank, I would suspect that your instinct was born of years of experience, and I would encourage you to stick with it. Argue with me, prove me wrong.
Okay.
Anyone want to hop in with a comment on that? We just got a couple of minutes left.
I just want to say something. I will change my mind, at least temporarily, and I will experiment. I don't use this, but I'm going to try, at least on the lower end. I understand 2,400 versus 2,500, but I never thought pricing $5 less in my mind, but yeah. I will take your word for it.
Yeah, it's worth an experiment. Now, obviously, with anything like this, we could take it to an extreme, and you won't come into my gallery and find things priced at $4.95, 50 cents, or $19.99, or those kinds of things. So there are limits in terms of what we want to do, but pricing is one of those things that I think we can get a little bit hung up on sometimes. Where it's really better to be pragmatic. If you want to be idealistic and kind of stand your ground on something, that should be with the work itself, with your creativity and your process and your inspiration. But when it comes to the mechanics, sizing, pricing, even format, that's where it's worth doing some experimentation. It really costs you nothing to do that experimentation and find those elements that make a difference. We do the same thing in the gallery in terms of display and kind of thinking about how the work is going to be shown. And at that point, again, idealism, I think just is counterproductive. We want to look for what works. But great. I mean, it's a great comment, and I'm glad we got to have that discussion and all of the other discussions we've had about format and about your work. We are out of time, but Frank, we will look forward to keeping an eye on what you're doing. You've got my email address. I would love to hear from you as you have an opportunity to present the portfolio to some more galleries and start getting feedback on it. And to all of us, I'm going to look forward to seeing us again in next week's online critique group session. Thank you so much, Frank, for agreeing to be in the hot seat today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you back here next Wednesday.